Hello, everyone. This is Mariah Cruz, and you're listening to the Spiritual Deep Dives podcast. What if everything you've been told about the Garden of Eden is wrong? Adam and Eve weren't the first humans in a paradise. They were initiates in a mystery school, and their fall was a turning point in the battle between light and darkness. For thousands of years, there were ancient spiritual truths and mystical teachings passed down only to the highest initiates walking the path back to God. It hasn't been until recent times that this secret knowledge has been available to the masses. Our team spent over 40 years researching many diverse spiritual, religious, and scientific sources, recording the wisdom from the ascended saints and sages of East and West, tapping into the Akashic records and calling on God's Holy Spirit to reveal the spiritual truths and science behind the unseen forces that govern our lives. In this podcast, we will explore these teachings from a unique perspective that you probably have never heard before, and show practical ways you can integrate them into your life to resolve deep-seated personal problems, accelerate your soul's evolution, and help solve the world's dilemmas. In this episode of teachings on fallen angels, Nephilim, and aliens, the Machios will reveal why the Garden of Eden wasn't a paradise of fruit and talking snakes. It was actually a mystery school on Lemuria where Adam and Eve faced the greatest test of their souls. What really happened there? You'll find out why this event still shapes humanity today. If you're joining us for the first time, because of the sequential nature of this series, we recommend listening to the previous episodes before beginning this one. So, let's get right into this one. In our last episode, we were talking about how mankind on Lemuria and around the world were improving from the low state they had devolved to. The evolutions were moving up, but even though it was getting better, the fallen ones still had a hold on people. In this episode, we are now tens of thousands of years past the time of the coming of Sanat Kumara, who is recognized in the Bible as the Ancient of Days. He is also known as the Lord God of Israel and Skanda, or Kartikeya, and is mentioned in Hindu religious texts, including the Vishnu Purana and the Bhagavata Purana. He is known as Brahma Sanat Kumara in Buddhism. So that's the Sanat Kumara who came to save Earth and all souls on the planet. It's amazing epic events finds such as these can be found in all of the world's religions. Now it's time to introduce probably the most well-known couple in history, Adam and Eve. The Ascended Masters revealed that they actually lived on Lemuria, although the continent had been broken up in many places due to karmic effects. Adam and Eve were dwelling in the etheric levels of matter, and from that level they observed the general situation on Earth. Mankind were beginning to understand and recognize relative good and evil versus absolute good and absolute evil. They were becoming wise to the machinations of the fallen ones. Some were still caught up in it, but they now knew there were two sides to the equation, the side of light and the side of darkness. So Adam and Eve decided they would go down to their level of vibration and either start a mystery school or be part of one. Such a school was possible now because there were enough people who could come together to learn higher truths and the mysteries of God. A mystery school is a community that is formed when enough souls warrant the presence of spiritually advanced teachers or gurus who come into incarnation because there is a sufficient number of souls who would be attracted to and ready to accept the transfer of light and teachings these masters came to give. So we can imagine Adam and Eve, who were part of a group of souls that had not yet embodied on Earth. They saw that there were enough embodied souls below that were becoming enlightened, and so they could now go into incarnation themselves, gather a large group of people to form a community, and establish a school known as the Garden of Eden, where they could once again reintroduce the teachings of the Ascended Masters, the Kumaras, and the angelic hosts. There were specific teachings that could be released which would further connect these souls to their innate God reality. So Adam and Eve decided to incarnate, fully aware of the risks, knowing the evil ones were still in full force, and not giving up in their attempts to again reverse the evolution of mankind. Now we will move into the epic of the Garden of Eden and what happened there because it is very misunderstood. We all grew up with a certain concept about the Garden of Eden from what we were taught. There were beautiful gardens with animals laying around, the tigers laying down with the lamb sitting with the goat, the dragonflies, etc. Everyone was there and no one had any clothes on. They're running around and there's a veritable life of ease. They ate fruit, they didn't have to hunt, they had nuts. It's a beautiful fantasy. But it's just a story, an allegory, and that's what we're really getting at. If people want to stick to that concept, that's fine, but the Ascended Masters show a different view from the Akashic records of what actually happened in the Garden of Eden. It should be clear by now that this was not the beginning of time, where we have Adam and Eve, who are the only two people on the planet, and by some incredible miracle they pull off populating an entire planet. No, we're talking now about thousands and thousands of people in this mystery school. If you listened to our last episode, you will know that there were millions, if not at least 1 billion or more people inhabiting the planet. So, this was a brilliant idea from the cosmic councils and the other hierarchs that Adam and Eve were working with to take on physical bodies and build this community called the Garden of Eden on Lemuria. It was a major thrust that was to be a counterpoint to what the fallen angels and the Luciferians were doing. Now these fallen ones were not happy at all with this community and were in trouble. This was not good for them. There were thousands of people in this mystery school, and the teachings of the Ascended Masters of Sanat Kumara were being reintroduced. So here came along this one brilliant individual that we discussed in episode 7. His name is what? You guessed it, Serpent. Do you think he was going to stand for this? No, he wasn't. Any self-respecting fallen one was going to attack in the best way they knew how. They saw what was coming down the road and decided they were going to infiltrate this community. So Lucifer and Satan had their own council meetings to determine who they could send, and Serpent, who was considered one of the most cunning of the fallen angels, was chosen. The teachings coming from the Garden of Eden were spreading. People were evolving. The idea of the heaven world and the prospect of the soul rising back up in vibration. No, the fallen ones couldn't have that truth spreading. So the fallen ones send their most cunning, the one who had tremendous mastery in the use of intellectualism and the use of human reasoning. Serpent had a brilliant mind, was extremely handsome, and very well possessed of himself. He had a charisma that made you almost fall in love with him. You would want to be his best friend. What he did was join the mystery school community from the very beginning of its creation and was part of it for a very, very long time. He became an extremely trusted and respected member. He personally knew Adam and Eve, who were basically the two chief disciples. Now, in order to have a mystery school, there needs to be a guru, which we haven't mentioned yet. Although Adam and Eve were part of the Garden of Eden, it was founded by the Lord God that we hear of in Genesis. This Lord God was a great teacher and guru, a divine incarnation, and the one we know today as Lord Maitreya, who is considered in Buddhist tradition to be the coming Buddha, but has actually come already. Now, whether or not he had the same name at the time, we don't know. But he was the guru of the Garden of Eden, and surrounding Lord Maitreya were the disciples, who must give obedience to them because he was taking them up through the levels and steps of initiation, leading to greater attainment and self-mastery. Initiation gives a greater degree of cosmic awareness. The greater the passing of the test, the more light is bestowed. And then, with 1 or 2 people passing the great initiations of Lord Maitreya, the entire planetary evolution would be raised higher in consciousness. If you obey the Guru, if you increase in cosmic consciousness, then you are gifted the fruit from the tree of life, but you must get it by following the Guru. The fruit is the attainment, and the Guru is the only one who gives you the daily tests to prove your mastery and self-control that earns you that light which comes from the great spheres of the causal body that is depicted in the chart of your divine self, which we discussed in the very first episode. So that is the fruit, now made manifest by the initiates given the fact that they follow the path of attainment that is laid out before them. And, we'll mention it again, the disciples always had free will. Just because Adam and Eve were initiates under their guru Lord Maitreya doesn't mean they didn't have free will, and Serpent knew that. and he knew that with his cunning intellectual arguments, he would slowly but surely turn the dial of perspective in Eve's mind to his way of thinking. He would say something like, "You know, I've been involved with this mystery school for a very long time, and there are other ways that we could really help the evolutions. We're not making much progress. Wouldn't you agree? You know, it's going slow, very slow, because you have to go through all this testing and initiation to earn more attainment, and sometimes you might fail an initiation, a test, and so it's delivered again by the great guru to the disciples." And so his mind games were playing out for a very, very long time. Serpent, being trusted, started to present to Eve different ways of looking at the situation inside and out of the mystery school. He said, "Let's do this a little bit differently. Perhaps if we don't do this, we can look at it this way," and so forth. He was very patient and subtle with his serpentine logic. With his great humanistic, materialistic viewpoints, his intellectualism, Serpent started to sway Eve to look at things in a different way. You could easily see this happening, where they're all sitting in a meeting and Eve might have said, "Well, you know, you have a point there. Perhaps if we go at it this way, we may have more response or progress with the students." They were trying to spread the teachings of the mystery school to those outside of the community, and so their influence was building. Now, we want to circle back and talk about the fruit of attainment that was won through testing and initiation. We're not talking about a tree with fruit on it, whereby Eve ate the apple that Serpent told her to eat, and then all hell broke loose. I'm sure you can see the analogy here. If you were there and had a snake talking to you, you'd probably say, "What? What do you mean? Why would you listen to or take instructions from a talking snake?" It might surprise you if people actually take this story literally anymore, but when you were young, it was taught as a literal event. The serpent is really allegorical for this individual, as we said, who is known as Serpent because of his mastery of the Kundalini. He rose to the crown chakra and had tremendous wisdom. So now Eve started listening to Serpent's advice. Now what is Adam doing? He's there too, and he also starts to be influenced. But Eve is the first one to actually succumb. According to the Akashic records that we've been told, she actually succumbed to Serpent's logic and decided to disobey her teacher, Lord Maitreya. But she didn't really know that what she chose was evil. She thought it was just a shortcut. The 3 temptations of Eve were recorded, but we're not going to get into them now because it would take at least an hour. If you want more information, you can find them in many books, including The Path of Self-Transformation by the Summit Lighthouse, which goes into extreme detail about the temptations of Eve, what they actually meant, and how they are applied to our own spiritual path today. Whether you're aware of it or not, every single individual on planet Earth, from then until now, will go through the same initiations that Eve and Adam did. Either you obey the guru, or you walk the path of humanism and materialism. Let's try to get it done without God. And intellectualism. Let's try to get it done by circumventing the guru, because, after all, long ago we rebelled against the guru. Long ago we rebelled against the spiritual hierarchy. Now we have to find all the ways and means of improving the economy, of educating people, of having alleged peace in the world. And these are the things that Adam and Eve were thinking about in the mystery school. Philosophies were evolved, all based upon this original rebellion. We've got to find a way beyond, around the guru's heart. We have to circumvent the guru. And so, Serpent did what he does best. And we're coming up to that famous line that we all know, where through his intellectualism, he is talking to Eve about different ways to do things. Now we have the tree of good and evil as absolute good and absolute evil, usually denoted by a capital G and a capital E. But what Serpent is trying to do is take Adam and Eve into the world of relative good and evil, where good is relative to evil and evil is relative to good, a concept we explored in detail in a previous episode. So there are no absolutes, and we have this grey area. This is what Serpent is brilliant at, creating a grey area. Now, there really should not be a grey area. If you have a bucket of white paint and you add even a little black paint into it, that entire bucket is now tainted. And as you add more, it starts to get darker and darker, gradually changing over to the black that you are adding. This is what Serpent was doing. He was slowly turning their thought process to relative good and evil. We can see this same logic playing out to a larger degree throughout society today. For example, in the 1950s, people were much more conformist, with social pressure to fit in and live according to traditional family and community expectations. Today, there is a much wider acceptance of what many consider abnormal societal expression and non-traditional family units. So Serpent then says to them, you can take up of the fruit of good and evil, relative good and evil, because you shall not surely die. Remember that line? You shall not surely die? Does that mean they were going to maybe die but not positively? Does that mean they may die but not surely? We think that statement was really saying, we can take them down by degrees so slowly that they won't realize how close they really are from losing their divine spark and breaking their connection with God. So you shall not surely die means they may be able to regain that divine spark once they lost it. However, Serpent and the fallen angels, along with mechanized man, were going to do everything possible so that they could not regain that divine spark again. And yes, they could die, but maybe not surely die, because Serpent knows there's always a chance that the souls of light could regain that divine spark. This argument is absolutely brilliant in the way he twisted things around enough to get Adam and Eve to follow his advice and disobey their teacher. You may recall in episode 2 when we discussed this same relativity as General Palpatine said to Anakin, "Good is a point of view." It actually illustrates the kind of subtlety and seduction that was used upon Eve. Now, Adam and Eve were what we call twin flames. They came out of the same God source. Everyone has a twin flame. We're not going to get deep into the teachings on twin flames right now, but it's different than what many call soulmates. Twin flames are the masculine and feminine polarities of one divine being. They are two halves of a single whole. Everyone has a twin flame that originated from the God source. So about Adam, when he finally succumbed to Serpent and the judgment was pronounced upon them for disobedience, Adam decided to suffer with and be with his twin flame, and you can see why. There's a divine connection. It is very difficult to pull away from the one you incarnated with and with whom you share that timeless bond. Eve had taken in the substance of relativity. There is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, with the capital G and the capital E. This represents the cosmic Christ consciousness, the fruit of the mighty I Am presence. But Serpent's tree is the lowercase version, which is relativity. Adam and Eve, having taken the path of relativity, could no longer attain the cosmic Christ consciousness because they failed the initiations of obedience to their teacher. So she could not reach the true tree, the levels of the Christ mind. And that's why Serpent said, "You shouldn't believe that tree. God knows that you'll be wiser than Lord Maitreya by knowing both good and evil. Don't you want to be wiser than your own guru?" It was a brilliant argument. Her succumbing also had to do with pride, which was injected into her during this whole period when Serpent was working on her consciousness, which took a very, very long time. And again, the sacrifice by Adam and Eve was astounding because they knew these things could happen when they embodied among those lower evolutions. So they both disobeyed their teacher and were cast out of the Garden of Eden as stated in Genesis. So they were not part of the community anymore. They lost the divine spark for a certain period of cycles, and they became mortal. Mortal means they didn't have the threefold flame, the divine spark burning within them. Then, as a result of this separation, they now had to deal with the full weight of their own karma. When they were in the mystery school, they had the intercession of the guru, who could help them bear a certain portion of their karmic condition and circumstances. Once they were removed from the mystery school, however, Lord Maitreya could no longer give them those specific dispensations, at least not in the way he could have had they remained in the community. We just want to make that point clear. Everyone has karmic accountability, but it is very different when you are no longer under a guru. You are out there, so to speak, on your own, and yes, it is worse because you no longer have the protection that the guru could give those who stay on the path. We also want to remind everyone of the fact that Adam and Eve were not the only two initiates. They were in a mystery school. Many, many people, twin flames who had come to save the planet and to help out, also succumbed to Serpent. It wasn't just Adam and Eve. Still, the idea was that Adam and Eve were the top initiates and there were groups under them. Once the leaders started to fall, the trust factor came into play. They thought, well, our leaders are going that way, let's just go that way too. So they were outside of the Garden of Eden now and had become mortal. In future lifetimes, these two individuals, as well as many, many others who also succumbed to Serpent's logic, were given the opportunity to re-enter the mystery school. That is another story completely, but we don't want to leave you with the idea that it was all hopeless for them, that there was no chance for redemption. Adam and Eve, in fact, did make their way back and were victorious. Unfortunately for Lemuria, because these two did not hold the balance, the darkness increased until we had the epoch of the sinking of a large part of Mu by volcanic action and the desecration of the great temples that were on Mu by the Luciferians and the Satans. We were not given an exact date on this, but we're thinking this occurred over 1 million years ago. And this again is karmic, a karmic recompense. When there's more darkness than light, then the cosmic councils give edicts that are passed down all the way to elemental life, those who work with the forms of the earth. They work with earth, air, fire and water and have to outplay the karmic condition. When parts of a continent break up, it shakes off and balances tremendous karma, even though many, many souls go through the transition. But remember, there is no such thing as death. Both sides re-embodied, the souls of light and the Luciferians, all who perished in this cataclysm. And they know, and we know that they're all going to re-embody anyway, so the story continues. We think that's all we're going to say about the Garden of Eden for now, and we'll continue our discussion from various scriptural passages. As you know, these passages have produced centuries of controversy. There has always been tremendous controversy on the specifics meanings. One of the purposes of this series is to back up the story of the fallen angels coming to earth through the scriptures of the West. Eventually, we will also be speaking about the scriptures of the East regarding these two evolutions of light and darkness. But now we're going to turn to the notorious Genesis, chapter 6, verse 4. This passage is for those who need further biblical proof that the fallen angels were actually embodied on earth. So we're reading from the Jerusalem Bible. The Nephilim were on the earth at that time, and even afterwards, when the sons of the gods resorted to the daughters of man and had children by them. These are the heroes of days gone by, the famous men. Okay, you were likely never taught that if you went to the various catechism classes in Catholic school. What's going on here? These are strange terms. The word Nephilim is derived from the Semitic root nephil, meaning to fall. So Nephilim is rendered in the Greek Septuagint, the translation in the 2nd or 3rd century BC, as giants. Instead of Nephilim, they said giants. But the term giants doesn't really get to the core. It doesn't capture what they are. The real meaning is the ones who fell. But that didn't make it in the scriptures, so we have to go through all of these Semitic roots to find out what was actually going on, what the real terms were. So many translations still use giants, but a more accurate translation is Nephilim. In other words, those who fell, or those who were cast down. This, as promised, is further biblical proof that the fallen ones were indeed on earth. No, they're not in hell as many in the faith would tell us. They were cast down from heaven to earth. So if anyone asks, where does it say that in the Bible? Just point them to Genesis 6, verse 4. These Nephilim, as it said in the passage, were wreaking havoc on earth, and they were also there afterwards. Afterwards means another epoch of time following that period. So what we're going to do now is fast forward to another epoch, to the 1st century, during the time of Jesus. Here we have further biblical proof in Jesus' famous parable about the tares, or the weeds, and the wheat. The disciples came and asked him to explain the parable of the tares and the wheat. This is what Jesus said. The field is the world. The good seed are the sons of the kingdom, but the tares are the sons of the wicked one. The enemy that sowed them is the devil. Accuser or slanderer, that's what this means. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are the angels. As therefore the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so shall it be at the end of this age. Then shall the righteous shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who hath ears to hear, let him hear. Well, that's very explosive. And one has to think, why would someone like Jesus, of his stature and attainment, call someone a wicked one? He doesn't do that with most people he meets. People are sinners, they have issues, but he doesn't use that term to describe them. So who are these sons of the wicked one? We're going to leave you with this thought and end this episode. Thanks for joining us. This concludes episode 9. Be sure to catch us in the next one where the Macchios will explore Jesus' parable of the wheat and the tares, examining its deeper meaning beyond traditional interpretations. This discussion will contrast the sons of the kingdom with the sons of the wicked one, linking these to the children of God versus the soulless creations of the fallen angels. Thank you for listening to Spiritual Deep Dives. If you like this content, please like and subscribe to our podcast. We'll catch you next time.